Sahana Bhavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahe, Tejasvinavahitamastu, Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Lord protect both of us, both the teacher and the student. May He nourish both of us with this knowledge. That means may this knowledge take place tonight between the teacher and the student. May both of us make effort for the capacity to understand this knowledge and to accept this knowledge. May what is studied by us be brilliantly clear, that is comprehended and contemplated upon. And may we not be subject to any kind of misunderstanding. And if there is, please ask, because we need to clarify those doubts in the class. We are on chapter 9, Bhagavad Gita, and we are almost to the end of it. So we're asking, where are we? And what have we done so far? So I will go back to verse 29. By verse 29, Krishna has finished speaking about Sakama and Nishkama Bhakti. If you remember, Sakama is anything pertaining to worldly desires, anything that I want in this world, like success or fame or money or status or position. All of this belongs to Sakama Bhakti. And Nishkama Bhakti is all those desires pertaining to the highest, which is moksha. This means a Nishkama Bhakta is a Jichinatsu. A Jichinatsu is one who is desirous of freedom from limitation. So Krishna has concluded Sakama and Nishkama by verse 29. And from verse 30 onwards, he is now going to bring the glories of devotion, bhakti. So if you're wondering what is the purpose and the point of devotion, we have already discussed that, but from verse 30 he is reiterating the glories of devotion. And why is devotion glorious? The reason is because no matter what stage a person, a bhakta, is in life, if they are a mother, a father, a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a worker, a CEO, an employee, whatever stage they're going through, bhakti caters to any stage. Therefore, it requires no previous intelligence or any kind of qualifications to get started. So that's the first glory of bhakti. And furthermore, sometimes we will find that we've got no one to turn to, even our own family and even our society and boss rejects us, and we feel really lonely in life. This is a common experience. It can even happen to a very advanced bhakta. And the glory is one can always turn to their higher deity. That means when no one is understanding me, when no one's there to hold me, to accept me and to hear my hurt, or to accept and share my happiness, then I can always turn to that one who is always present, which is none other than yourself. When we say yourself, we're talking about Atma. When we talk about Atma, we're speaking of Ishvara, because there's no difference. And Krishna has also said, when the moment the person decides to take on bhakti, that is to accept the presence of a higher deity, they are called a sadhu purusha. When you've probably heard the word sadhu before in English, it is not sadhu, it is sadhu. A sadhu means good. That means a good person. So the moment one turns to devotion, that is to a higher deity, they are a sadhu purusha. Why is this the case? Why are they a good person the moment they turn to something other than relying on their own limited mind? The reason is because it requires a great amount of humility for a person to accept the limitations of their own free will. Despite the ability to be able to perform, to choose, to go from here to there, the person eventually recognizes, I am indeed limited. I do not know very much and I need help. Therefore, the person's understanding of their limited free will is a sadhu purusha. And a sadhu purusha is a good person, and a good person is one with humility, because they're letting go of their own sense of control and giving it to something other than themselves. They're asking for help. So this means the moment one turns for help, the moment one asks for help, is what we call wisdom. Whereas arrogance is not asking for help when I need it. Because not to ask for help when I need it implies that I can do the job better myself. So this means the attribute of a bhakta, the first attribute, is the willingness to ask for help when required. Because there's great strength in that. It's recognizing that despite my competencies in life, I still require help in certain things. Furthermore, when one acknowledges the presence of the ever-available infinite Ishvara, then it also brings a great amount of emotional strength. As we said before, sometimes we've got no one to turn to, and when we are always feeling close with our higher deity, then it brings a strong sense of emotional independence from the world. Before we were depending on external objects for our satisfaction, for example, our children or our partners, or someone, our money or business. Now, owing to the devotion of our higher deity, we have a sense of emotional strength that's holding us, because when is Ishvara not? So wherever we look, wherever we think, it is always pervaded by Ishvara. Furthermore, when one is held by this emotional strength, owing to their connection to Ishvara, with Ishvara, then there is less temptation to fall for old ways. For example, even taking 1 month from Vedanta, one may notice, or may not, depends how sensitive one is, that we are prone to falling back into old ways at certain sections in our life. So this is normal, and there's nothing to be sad about this or unhappy, because this is the nature of the mind. The mind's very easily flexible, and it adapts to whatever environment you put it. The moment you take it away from truth, it starts to take the appearances and makes that as the truth. So therefore, this is a consistent life reminder. Now, what happens after a devotional life has taken place? This means when one has accepted the presence of a higher deity, the process is there is an inner transformation, because we just said emotional strength. That means there's a sense of independence. What does transformation mean? It means that I am independent from depending on something else, from my completion. So this inner transformation then brings confidence to the individual, to the bhakta, and this then causes them to increase devotion. And when their devotion increases, that causes further motivation for inner transformation. So in other words, inner transformation leads to greater devotion. Greater devotion leads to an even faster, more smoother, more polished, more refined inner transformation. So this is what we call an auspicious addiction, which is what we want. Right? We do have addictions in life, but this is an auspicious, positive addiction. What is more better than to be addicted to the presence of a higher deity who is always wherever one seeks? Samyak vyavastitaha, in other words, the person, after having owned up to the higher deity, has resolved rightly. Now, what does resolved rightly mean? Which means they have done, as a human being can do, the highest possible decision or use of their free will. And what is that? Using my free will to own up my free will to that which is higher than my free will. In other words, to Ishvara. Before I was using my free will to take control, to take hold of things. Now I'm using my free will to decide I am not that powerful, I am not that intelligent, I am not that smart, so therefore I use that free will to surrender it to the higher deity, to Ishvara. Now why is one able to surrender to Ishvara? Or how are they able to do that? By the means of Shastra. Now why in the Shastra? Because the Shastra is that place or that source which intends no harm. That's why one can have faith in the Shastra. Because if you read the Shastra, the sacred text, there is not a single thing, at least if you're taught by an Acharya, that intends harm for the reader. Nothing says go and steal, go and cheat, go and lie, and any of that. It is actually pointing us to the highest way of living on earth. That's the first reason why one can put faith in the Shastra, which is able to which is the means of knowledge of Ishvara. The second reason is because if you look at the Shastra, nothing can be improved. So this means whichever way you want to look at it, it is already the most effective, the most efficient way already. And if you think you can improve it, then if you go into another particular Upanishads, then you'll see that it's already mentioned, probably even better than you thought of. So this means Shastra is a complete text. You cannot improve it, or you cannot put it from a different angle and say, well, here's a modern way that's more applicable today than it was 5,000 years ago. And furthermore, after the Shastra has been contemplated upon, one will realize that their vision is being aligned with the reality. And what's the result of that? Peace, a sense of inner peace and harmony with the world. And the last reason is, contemplating upon the Shastra leads to the highest purpose in life, which is moksha. How do we know this? We know this because the rishis say so, and we also know this because anyone who we revere in this world has also attended to the Shastra, they have followed the Shastra, they have thought about what the Shastra says, and as a result of doing so, we then call them rishis, we call them sages, we call them masters, we call them enlightened beings. So in other words, following the Shastra works. Now, next question. After following a devotional life, what happens next? This will be covered in verse 30. Okay, together. Kshipram bhavati dharmatma shashvachantim nigacchati kaunteya pratijanihi Name bhaktaf pranashyati. Okay, we'll do a new style yasir. And Gopru, please read.
Soon he becomes a noble soul, mind conforming to Dharma, and certainly attains lasting peace. O Arjuna, declare to all, my devotee never perishes.
Very good. Question is, what will happen after the person decides that self-knowledge is the only goal worth pursuing? That's another way of saying what happens after the person engages in a fully devotional life. And then Krishna says, Saha kshipram dharmatma bhavati. In other words, his or her mind, that means your mind, begins to value dharmatma, means dharma. Atma in this case means mind. So your mind begins to value dharma more than artha and kama. Remember, artha means wealth. What does wealth mean? I want security in worldly possessions. That means, see, this is not bad when we say, I want wealth. It just means I want worldly resources. The only thing is when a person makes their whole life about the worldly resources, then obviously they're ignoring dharma. But this person is putting dharma first ahead of artha and kama. What is kama? Luxury. Today we have big houses, do we not? I want a bigger house with a pool, please, and a sauna. It has to face the sun. High standards. The car has to always be clean, right? All of these little details count. This means that the person's focus is very much still attracted to kama, luxury. So all of these small details, and even having a proper chair to sit on, or they cause complaints in life, a lot of them, if one's focus is much on artha and kama. And furthermore, this person decides to take the path, the hard path of non-compromise over the easy path of artha and kama. What do I mean by this? Imagine you're walking in a field and you see a phone, a new phone, and it is unlocked, luckily, right? No passcode. Now you go, oh, interesting. I can now either erase the contents on this phone and make it my phone, or I can erase the contents of this phone and sell it on eBay, make some money. So what does this person do? We said this person resorts to the hard path of non-compromise. In other words, even though I can sell this phone or use it for myself, what is the right thing to do here? It is to call their neighbors, call their family on their list and say, what's the address? I'd like to return this phone back. In other words, the person is fully aware that nobody is watching and they can easily get away with it, but they choose not to compromise ethics. Why? Because they understand if this happened to me, I would certainly want my phone back. They understand and feel the pain of the other individual. Or suppose that you're in an exam and you look around you and everyone's cheating. Right? They're using their Apple watches, little notes, and underneath the ruler, like underneath the palm, everyone's getting away with it. And you're looking and you say, wow. And you go, even though I could cheat, I'm not going to. Because this is not about impressing someone. If I've really studied well, I deserve to get good marks. So therefore, I'm going to do to the best of my ability, and I'm not going to cheat. In other words, this person is not compromising general ethics, even though they can get away with it. Thus, what kind of a person is this? The one who chooses the path of dharma over artha and kama. Because remember, kama is taking that phone for yourself. That's luxury, and that's also a resource. So thus, in this way, they grow out of the artha-kama delusion, the one that grabs the person very strongly, and it's hard to let go of, but it can be done. And it doesn't mean they reject them, because they understand that wealth and luxury, okay, they are there for you, but I don't need to reject them. I just don't make much merit out of them. I don't make much value out of them. I understand they are only incidental secondary goals, whereas the first ones are what? Dharma, followed by moksha. And in this way, this dharmatma, this mind of dharma, mind of ethics, mind of following what is right, becomes a Jichinatsu. What is a Jichinatsu? We will soon see. Generally, what they do is they direct most of their time, energy, resources, efforts into inner growth. That is a dharmatma person. Inner growth. Inner growth according to being more successful in this world in terms of artha and kama? No. Inner growth according to Shastra. Now, the next question is, what is a Jichinatsu? Because remember, the person who follows dharma, the one who doesn't compromise, eventually is qualified for Jichinatsu status. A Jichinatsu is the one who is only and mainly interested in knowing the nature of Ishvara. What is the truth? I want to know the truth. And how does the truth relate to myself? Why are they doing this? Because over time they have concluded that the ultimate source of peace, of joy, and of happiness is from none other than from Ishvara. Not from an object. Because if it wasn't an object, what's the logical fallacy with that if the joy was in an object? Suppose that I want a house. It gives me a lot of joy. How do we know that the house is not a source of happiness? Because if it was, then every single person would find the equal amount of joy in that same house. But they don't. Some people think it's not a nice house at all. But I think it's a nice house. In the same thing, some people like a lot of money. But some of us are not interested. We think, well, I'm not interested. It means nothing to me. I just need something basic. So in other words, it cannot be money. So the person, owing to their clarity of the mind, has concluded the joy cannot be an object. Because if it was in a man or a woman, then every single person in the entire world would want that person. But we know that's not true. Only I want that person with the intensity that I want them. Now, as a result of knowing this, that the ultimate source is from Ishvara, is of Ishvara, what happens to the Jichinatsu's devotion? It increases. Then what happens? Krishna says in the next chapter, 10.10, he says, after some time, this Jichinatsu, whether it's a he or a she, eventually from somewhere, somehow, in some way, at some time, Guru Shastra comes. As though magically, automatically. Now you're going to say, how is this possible? Well, look at it this way. When a flower blooms, what happens? Bees come. When the flower blooms, does a flower send out postcards to various beehives going, hey, I'm ready for action, pollinate me? Huh? No. In other words, there is an automatic order built into creation between cause-effect relationship. When one thing happens, automatically something else arises. But what do we human beings do? We do not trust this law, so thus we interfere, fearing that it's not going to work out, so we actually intercept this natural law and it doesn't bring us the Guru Shastra. For example, if you look at a bee and a plant, let's say a daisy or lavender, because that's what they pollinate, a bee in spring will automatically find the right plant. In this case, a daisy or lavender. The plant itself will emit either an ultraviolet light, which is how the bees detect the flower to pollinate, or by the scent of the flower. Now, who built this in? Did the bee learn this from a book? No. So this is already coming in to the program. Now, what program are we talking about? All knowledge, sarva jnanam, which is Ishvara. So we can start to see the intelligent cause-effect relationship built into entire creation. Furthermore, when the bee lands onto the flower, not only does it know to take the nectar for itself back to the beehive, but also the intelligence has made it so that the male, the stamen of the flower brushes onto the legs of the bee. And so when the bee goes to the next flower, what happens to get when the bee gets more nectar? The stamen, the male reproductive organs, brush off onto the female, the stigma of the female plant, and then it pollinates the plant, and then what happens to the plant? It gives you nice flowers. Now, is this an accident? It's just chaotically built together like this? No, the point is, you can start to appreciate how every single detail in every part of creation has a perfectly intelligent structure that serves a purpose to something else. And you don't have to worry about it. Why? Because wherever you look is nothing but all knowledge, all power working in immaculately perfect ways that is beyond our senses. And yet it is inbuilt and you cannot do anything about it. In the same way, when the Jichinatsu blooms, when this knowledge, when the mind blooms into purity, and one becomes a Jichinatsu, that means one of a clear mind, what happens? Shastra, as though like a flower, and Guru automatically comes. So this means we don't have to worry about the Guru and the Shastra. Usually what happens is a person will get invited to some event and they will go, oh, I kind of like it, and they will stay. So we don't have to worry about, where I'm going to find my teacher, where, who's going to have the Shastra, who's going to explain to me. It always comes. One just has to accept this simple law. However, some minds are not going to accept this law, so we'll provide a logic why Guru Shastra comes automatically. What you want wants you. Is that your experience? When a man wants a woman, the woman's like, get away from me. But eventually, because he wants her, or it could be the other way around, she starts to want him. What you want is automatically seeking you. It's an inherent law built into creation. In other words, what's this inherent law? Whatever desire there exists, it should be fulfilled. For example, where there is desire for thirst, there has to be water. Where there is desire for hunger, or where there is hunger, there has to be food. Where there is desire for creating new life, there has to be reproductive organs. Where there is desire to perform activity during daytime, there has to be nighttime for rest. Where there is desire, or where there is ignorance of a particular subject matter, there has to be knowledge which removes that ignorance. That's why education is so big in this world, because people have a certain ignorance about a certain topic and they need to remove this ignorance. So what happens? We create teachers. So teachers are satisfying the desire of ignorance for a particular topic. Where there is desire for liberation, for freedom, ceasing of rebirth, for moksha, there has to be Guru, Shastra, which is a means to moksha. In other words, if there is one single desire without a polar opposite, it is technically a flawed creation. Wherever there is a up, there is a down. Wherever there is a left, there has to be a right. Wherever there is a desire, a problem, there has to be a solution. And what is a solution in this case for ignorance, for constant rebirth? It is Shastra and the Guru. So again, this shows us everything in creation is already provided. We don't have to worry about it. We just have to accept that what the Shastra is saying is indeed the solution for removing ignorance. And in this way, this Jichinatsu Bhakta is then converted into a Jnani. What is a Jnani? One with firm knowledge. Nishtha Jnanam. What does firm knowledge mean? Firm knowledge means you know it so well that it is beyond shadow, it is beyond doubt. There's no question about it. For example, there's no question that if you're a female gender, that you're a female. You don't go, I'm not sure about that. Same thing for a man. There's just no question. The question doesn't arise. If you're driving back home tonight, there's no question that you know how to drive. You don't go, I'm not quite sure that I'm going to drive safely on the road. You're 100% confident that this knowledge of driving is firm. In fact, you're so confident it doesn't even arise as a question whether you're confident or not. It's just firm. In the same way, what is a jnani? One with firm knowledge, nishtha jnanam, pertaining to who I am and who I am not. Satya Mithya distinction is 100% clear. After this conversion to a jnani bhakta, then what? And then Krishna says, Shashvachantim nigacchati. In other words, one certainly attains unbroken peace. Now you're going to question, what do you mean by unbroken peace? Is this an emotion that you're speaking of? Because emotion belongs to where? The mind. And the mind, whatever begins, is going to end. So it cannot be an emotion. So this peace that we're talking of, a jnani, a liberated person, is owning to their knowledge. And this knowledge doesn't allow, even though it is still present throughout the body, mind, intellect, doesn't allow life's upheavals and various problems to swoop over a person completely. It still happens because there is a body, mind, intellect present. So this means a jnani, a wise person, is not going to suddenly be completely emotionless or no thoughts or any of that. All of those thoughts continue and emotions are as they always are. The only difference is owning to knowledge, they don't really matter so much because they're a different order of reality called Vyavaharika. And Vyavaharika is going to go on whether we like it or not. If there's pain in the body, I can't stop it. Whether I'm a jnani or not, I'm not going to stop it because it is a different order of reality belonging to the body-mind. When I say the jnani, what specifically am I talking about? Where is this knowledge known? In the buddhi, in the intellect. In other words, the buddhi has ascertained very well that all pains and pleasures are saguna. What does saguna mean? With attributes, with characteristics. In other words, all conditions belonging in the body, mind, intellect are with attributes. Why do we call with attributes? Because they have attributes. That's why we constantly name them. I have a sore stomach, I have a sore tooth, I am sad, I'm happy, I'm joyful, I'm peaceful, on and on and on. So in other words, whatever we can name, whatever we can identify, whatever we can observe, whatever we can know of, whatever we can detect, pick up is what? Saguna. Whereas the truth of I is nirgunam. Why? Because if you think about saguna, which means?
Boundaries.
Saguna means?
Boundaries.
Okay, that's another word. Boundaries pertaining to a specific condition. So every boundary or every condition is identified specifically. For example, if we take a white piece of paper, it has no attributes. Just suppose it is blank. Now, when I write with a blue paper, with a blue pen, I say blue. When I write with a red, remember blue is an attribute, saguna. Red is an attribute, saguna. When I write red, a line, I go red. I don't say the blue is red and the red is blue. If I erase the blue, I go red. If I erase the red and I write the blue, I go blue. If I write the blue and the red, I go blue, red. I don't confuse. I don't go red and green, right? I don't do that. In other words, whatever is identified, it is only done so because of a pure substratum in whose presence and because of which every single saguna attribute is clearly validated for what it is. Thus, we make no mistake between the feelings of sadness and happiness. When you're happy, they go, I'm not sure if I'm happy today. Am I? Right? No, you don't make a mistake. You're 100% clear. Why? Because every attribute, every emotion, every thought has a distinct condition, and that condition, as though like a pen, a blue or a red or a green, is identified exactly for what it is. Therefore, what is my nature? That because of which all conditions in this body, mind, intellect are identified precisely for what they are. Thus, my nature is that which illumines saguna conditions belonging where? In a body, mind, intellect. And that includes this entire world. Furthermore, Krishna reassures us and he says, Name bhaktaha pranashyati. You will certainly have material falls, even after ascertaining this knowledge firmly. Even as a jnani, you will have material falls. Isn't that encouraging? Material falls means health issues will come. For example, Ramana Maharishi, he got cancer in his left arm, right? And we got some more examples like this. Now, why would they still have material falls? Because of? Okay, prarabdha karma. What is prarabdha karma? That karma which is yet to fructify because I have done some action in the past and which has produced an effect yet to arise. So in other words, if I have been kind to someone and gave him some money and didn't really receive a thank you or anything, they just sort of, took it and nothing happened. Now, a couple of years later, you need some money. and they see you and they go, oh, there's a great connection now. And then you tell them about your situation, your temporary financial situation, and what do? They give you back the money exactly when you needed it. So in other words, this is what we call prarabdha karma. I always get what I deserve. What does this mean? My life, your life, everyone's life is a precise, identical reflection of every single action done by none other than yourself in the past. So this means if we can acknowledge this prarabdha karma very well, we can start to embrace our life as being 100% in accordance to how we are living every single day. Because even today, you're generating prarabdha karma for tomorrow. In other words, how one's life is today is a reflection of how one has lived yesterday. If I asked the same question yesterday, I would say your life today is a reflection of yesterday. How your life is as a newborn baby, which we will get into, suppose you're born in a very unfortunate family with diseases, it is 100% reflection with karma in Purva Janma, in the past life. We will get to that soon. However, what do we say so far? A jnani will still have a material fall, but, or in this case it's still a Jichinatsu, but they will never have a spiritual fall. In other words, the most important fall you will not have. Why? Because we said at the beginning, you have resolved rightly. You're doing the highest possible expression as a human being, which is offering yourself to the highest deity, to the highest knowledge. Mam hi partha vyapashritya ye pisyuh papayo nayaha striyo vaishyas tatha shudra te piyanti param gatim.
O Arjuna, even women, Vaishya, Sudras, and those who are of sinful birth certainly attain the supreme goal by taking refuge in me.
Krishna is going to point out disadvantaged people or handicaps which are still able to attain liberation but have certain challenges in front of them to deal with, owing to certain conditions or life circumstances. So the important point while listening is all these types that we're about to explain can still attain liberation. What kind of disadvantages do we mean? It could be intellectual disadvantages, emotional, it could be physical. You know those people who are born physically disabled? Yeah, there's a reason for that. They could be environmental. That means they're born in extremely tough conditions that are making it almost impossible to think of anything other than survival. Parental. Okay, for example, a good point, Nastika. Nastika means one, suppose someone's born with a Nastika parents. Nastika means they're not believers of anything other than material. Like they're just, they're just to survive, make money, son, daughter, just find a good husband or marry, have good kids, and that's all there is to it. There's no religious particular devotion. It's devoid of even ethics. Ethics are just there to basically survive, but nothing more than that. Or another example, if you know Oprah Winfrey, she was born with a single teenage mom, and she was even molested as a young girl, and she was pregnant at 14. Her child was prematurely born and died. Now look at her today. Successful, extremely. So this is one example that even if someone is born in a disadvantaged situation, they can still be a highly successful and inspirational person in the society. Another example is from the Puranas. We have Prahlada, who was born to Hiranyakashipu, and his father, Hiranyakashipu, was an asura. Asura means one who is extremely tamasic. They have no morals, and they completely just shut down when God comes into the picture. It's like, no, none of this. We don't want any of this. It doesn't exist. So even more than an atheist at least is objective, but an asura is completely rebellious against anything pertaining to religion. And he wanted to stop Prahlada from worshipping Vishnu because Prahlada was extremely devotional. But he couldn't, because Prahlada's devotion was so big for his deity. So even though the conditions were not right or favorable, Prahlada was still a jnani, an enlightened person. Again, in all examples that I just mentioned, underprivileged as we can be or as one may be, it does not stop one from attaining or pursuing the highest goal in life. There is a condition though. Krishna says, Mam Vyapashritya. One stops, the condition is, if one stops entirely depending upon one's own ability and surrenders to guidance of a higher deity in the form of devotion, prayer, Shastra, or Acharya. So there's no excuse for not attaining the highest goal in life. For example, if one is injured, they've got a sore foot, do they walk by themselves or do they ask for help? Hold someone's hand? Yeah. Or you get a walking stick. In other words, they ask for external help from someone. They refuse to, try to arrogantly say, I can't do it by myself. And because of this, they get helped and they move forward. So despite the disadvantages, you can still move forward because all of the resources in today's society are provided. Now, there are 4 types that Krishna is going to speak of which are disadvantaged. The first one is Papa Yonayaha, a person who is born in a non-conducive atmosphere. Atmosphere for spirituality specifically. Suppose the parents are drug addicts or alcoholic, one or the other, and the person is born in that family. It's very hard to move away from that, especially if the cigarettes and all of the swear words, the swearing and the lack of order, the lack of goodness in the family. It's very hard to get away from that as the person grows up. Usually they'll end up, being an insensitive person in one way or the other. So that's the first one. Another example is, often we say, what about those children in Africa? They're born in a very challenging environment. Usually there's, 5, 10 kids in one family. They can hardly feed themselves, and yet they make more kids. And it's a disease-infested environment sometimes. There's no clean water and there's no clean food, which means even survival resources are hard. That's another example. Certainly disadvantaged. Or suppose the parents are atheists and they are anti-Ishvara, they're anti-God. Right? So suppose they're extremely scientific. It's called scientific materialism. So everything's reduced down to the smallest particle, and that's all there is to it. Another disadvantage to the child. Now, why they're born in this kind of family? Why is a person born in Africa in a disease-infested environment without clean water nor nutritious food? Past life, papa karma. Very simple. So if we understand this principle of karma, then none of these unfortunate circumstances seem anything out of the ordinary. They're fully understood to be a simple continuation of everything that I've done in the past life is simply carried over to the next one, therefore I continue. I said this already, everyone is exactly where they deserve to be, based on the past actions. Second one, striyaha, woman. Firstly, understand Vedanta is a pursuit of knowledge. It requires an intellect and a mind. This means it requires a sharp mind. Why? Because in order to understand something, you need a mind. In other words, in Vedanta, we are not concerned with physical attributes of a person. What does this mean? We're not concerned the tallness of a person, the age of a person, how old the body is. We're not concerned about your height, your slimness, your beauty. If you got 5 abs, 6 abs, we're not concerned about that. Because abs or a nice hand or a nice foot or a nice leg cannot do anything about knowledge. You need a mind for knowledge. In other words, you require a Vijnana Maya Kosha has to be number one. Your intellect has to be sharp. Now, if it's about the mind and if it's not about the physical, then what does that mean? Vedanta doesn't care whether you are a gender of a female or a male, because that's also a physical attribute, is it not? So then why does Krishna say woman? What does this mean according to the context of the Shastra? And this is a lovely example actually. If one reads the Shastra by themselves, a lot of funny things may happen by looking at statements like this directly. Usually we would take this literally, woman, and go, okay, now women have a certain disadvantage, and what happens is over some time you have really strange cultural ideas spreading. For example, one gender is superior and one gender is not superior. And it still goes on today in various countries. Why? Because people read things like this and then go, okay, well here's women, obviously they're a disadvantage, they're not superior, we are superior, and you have this total mix-up. So then why does Krishna say woman? The reason is because, per Shastra, this is being connected to an overwhelmingly emotional personality. This is a symbol for an emotional personality. What do we mean by this? And what's wrong with emotional personality, right? When the personality of a person is highly emotional, what does it do? It obstructs logical, rational thinking. And Vedanta requires a high precision of, a high development of rationale and logic in order to ascertain this knowledge firmly. Why? Because emotion comes and goes. But if one's consistently relying on emotion, then they're going to be a total victim to feeling good, feeling so-called enlightened, and then something happens in life and that feeling is gone. In other words, if the emotions dominate the intellect, if the Manomaya Kosha dominates the Vijnana Maya Kosha, then Vedanta will be in conflict with the individual most of the time. They simply will not agree. They will probably get angry to some statements. They'll probably take it on to the teacher or onto the teaching, call the Shastra fraud or, old or uncool or incorrect, and they will make different ideas to justify their feelings. For example, what happens if you give alcohol to a smart person? Right? Extremely irrational. For example, suppose there's a man who is being rude to a woman, and then another man comes and says, stop being rude, this is not, you're being impolite to her. What does the other man do? Oh, this is a confrontation, right? You wanna confront me. And then you say, no, this is not the right thing to do. And then they, they try to turn on the heat. In other words, without intellect, reason and logic goes out the window. In the same way, without the intellect, if the emotional personality is dominant, then Vedanta is impossible to agree with. A person is just going to have a problem with it. What is the primary disadvantage of an emotionally dominant personality? The person who is overly emotional or generally emotional dominantly, that means they put emotions over intellect, values personal relationships and attachments. In other words, their favorite word is exclusivity. I need someone to be exclusive with. I need someone to look at me in a special way that they don't look at anyone else. And if they look at someone else how they look at me, then I have a problem. That means I am not special. In other words, exclusivity means I always desire to either love someone or to be loved. I want to protect someone, to take care of someone, to make someone's life positive, to make someone's life pleasant, to care for someone, to provide for someone, or I like to be held by someone. I like to be embraced by someone. I like to stand on a firm foundation of someone. I like to be taken care of. I like to be pleased. So what is this? Emotional personality. In other words, Vedanta says we need to mature out of this kind of emotional dependence on another individual for a sense of my completion, for a sense of my fulfillment. Why? Because over time it leads to bondage, dependence. In other words, when something's not working out, then instantly it affects my state. And a person with an affected state, are they going to think in peace? Are they going to meditate in peace about the highest knowledge? No, they're going to be concerned about where is he? He's not home, right? By the exact hour, by the exact minute. Small details like this count. They start to add up. They stack up. And a person invests most of their time, energy, and effort concerned with either loving or being loved by someone else. And it's very hard to think about this knowledge with that kind of an attitude. Now, what does Vedanta then ask, considering the emotional personality has a disadvantage? Vedanta says, the truth of who you are, in other words, I am already whole, full, and complete. Nothing is missing. Aham Brahmanasmi. Whereas, what is the motto of an emotional personality? I am not complete, but to be completed, I need the presence of another. Only then I feel full, I feel secure. Do I experience myself as in union with belonging? In other words, Vedanta says I am one without a second. But emotion says I am incomplete and I need a second to be one. I am incomplete and I need the second to be complete. So there's a direct contradiction there. Furthermore, if an emotional personality renounces the world, suppose they're decently smart, what do they still do? It's very subtle. They get attached. Remember what they value? Personal relationships or attachment. They love that. They love being attached to something or someone. Even if they're not attached to the world and they're a little bit smart, what are they attached to? Shastra and Guru. In other words, there is still a dependence on the Guru for my sense of security, for my sense of being or feeling like I am at peace with the world. I need another hit. I need to go to the class and get another hit of feeling like everything's fine. This is again emotional dependence. So this means an emotional personality is always looking for a savior. They may not know it, but there is a savior, whether it is in a person, usually it's in a person, or a certain thought, a certain memory, a certain idea in the future, like, oh, my savior is my enlightenment in the future. So they hold on to that belief and they depend on that to be there for the sake of what? Feeling good.
The whole culture revolves around promoting that.
Yeah, that's the thing. So that is a disadvantage because we are born by depending, by feeling happy by having certain things in our life. So what happens is they will also turn Ishvara into a person, because that's how, as Barton said, we're dependent on, we're used to, we're conditioned to think like this. So we turn Ishvara into an either father, a mother, or a child. The second way to interpret this, woman, is this. Biologically, women, I'm talking about female gender now, have an urge to take care for their child. The man doesn't have this as much. But all women, a mother who gives birth to an offspring, will naturally have a biological urge to care for this child because it's like my child. And this causes a potential conflict in Vedanta. What do we mean by that? The child becomes the primary goal in life. Now, what does Krishna respond to this? Krishna says, it's okay. Be attached to your child because, let's face it, it is impossible to, you're probably not going to, number one, detach from your child. You're probably going to keep loving your child, thinking about your child, and it's just not reasonable to say detach from your child. So Krishna says, be attached to your child because you can't help it. However, also remember to be attached to Ishvara. Child is a secondary goal. The third type you put down is Vaishya. Now, Vaishya, this we will cover in the next verse. A Vaishya is the one who is concerned with profit. That means they have a commercially oriented mind. So Vaishya, if you look at people today who are running our shops, who are running our businesses, who are moving the stock market, who are the movers and shakers of this commercial world, they are Vaishya. They are dominantly rajasic, but selfish. In other words, they still contribute to this world. However, their main motive is, how can I profit, how can I earn, how can I gain or acquire onto myself by doing this? The Brahmana, I'll explain these later, is highly sattvic with a little bit of Raja. Kshatriya is rajasic with a little bit less sattva. Dominantly rajasic, and Shudra is dominantly tamasic. And they're all about living life to the fullest. You heard this phrase? Just live life to the fullest. In other words, most of our world of personal development and self-help has to do with satisfying or appeasing the need for a Vaishya. For example, I use resources like laws, like thinking about it, contemplating about it for the sake of getting more. And they are also outgoing. Now the next type is number 4, Shudraha. These are tamasic dominant personalities. They like to follow orders. They don't use their minds very much. Their philosophy of life is eat, drink, and marry. When we say drink, it doesn't mean drink alcohol. It's just a phrase, enjoy yourself. In other words, throw yourself into sensual experiences, satisfy yourself and your partner as much as you want. Just enjoy life. What's the problem? And that's why you're born. When you're dead, that's all there is to it. You're finished. So for that reason, enjoy life to the maximum. And they're highly animalistic. That means they represent the animalistic lower instincts. In other words, survive and enjoy, right? We're not calling this bad, by the way. We're just saying how the person is motivated. And they also have impulsive thinking. I don't want to use my mind. Just tell me the instructions and I will follow them. And they're extremely good at following orders. So these 4 types I will talk about in the next session, how they move this world, how this world reflects around them. Okay, summary of the 4 types which are disadvantaged. Before I say that, all these 4 types, through diligent practice, and through devotion, can transform their lives. That's the important part. The first one is Papa Yonayaha. Born in challenging circumstances. And these circumstances usually scar the child. Second, Striyaha. More emotional than rational. Fourth, Vaishyaha. Profit commercial oriented. 4, Shudraha. Laziness. Kim punar brahmanah punyaha bhaktarajarshasya tata anityam asukham lokam imam prapya bhajaswamam.
Then what to talk of the virtuous Brahmins and devout royal sages? Having come to this impermanent, joyless world, worship me.
Now we're going to get onto the 2 Brahmana and Kshatriya. If Shudraha and Vaishya can attain liberation, remember we talked about the bottom two, profit-oriented. In the business world, they love to make money, they talk about money, they go to self-help seminars, they go to business seminars, they have a lot of activity going on, making it big, name and fame, very popular, a lot of nice suits and all that. And a Shudraha, lazy. In other words, I don't want to do much work, just tell me what to do, just give me the money, and I just make for myself and for my family, and that's all there is to it. If those two can attain liberation through diligent and consistent practice, then what to talk about the Brahmana and the Kshatriya, who are in a much better position. Now you're going to ask naturally, what is a Brahmana and a Kshatriya? Okay, what is a Brahmana? First of all, their personality is sattvic. That means they're very clear-minded. They usually work in jobs that require a lot of thinking, planning, like research. They're guides, they're teachers, they're virtuous by nature. They're usually the deep personality. These types don't have any craving for artha and kama. And anything for them is quite easy in terms of knowledge. Whatever you give them, they'll quickly figure out. Like law of relativity, you send them, they will quickly look at it around. You give them a complex problem, they will sort that out very quickly. And they will think in creative ways, like how to solve this. They'll be able to plan things extremely well. Now, why is one born as a Brahmana? Remember, Brahmana is extremely lucky in their mind. They're very pure by nature because of Purva Janma. In other words, past life. Now, what is a Kshatriya? Also Rajasic, just like a Vaishya. Remember, a Vaishya is a Rajasic but selfish. Now, Kshatriya is Rajasic but selfless. That means they're very active in the society, but all of their actions are for the sake of contributing to the nation, to the community, to the benefit of man and womankind. That's what they're interested in. For example, Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, Abraham Lincoln. Okay, all of these people who were very active, the India freedom fighters, they have a certain goal, but that goal is always for the sake of a higher good of all. Because the nation deserves to be free, therefore I'm willing to sacrifice my life for my nation. This is a Kshatriya. This is Arjuna also. You want to save the forests, you want to save clean up the oceans, anything that has to do with good for all of us, clean the air, proposing new sanctions, new laws that are meant to reduce carbon emissions. All of these things that require a lot of effort and time, but are for the sake of all of us. Global warming reduction, all of this is Kshatriya. And a Kshatriya, as a result of their decently pure mind, which is always thinking about the whole, they very quickly, they're very attracted to Karma Yoga. In fact, their natural life is an expression of Karma Yoga, whether they know about it or not. Because Karma Yoga is always what? Devoting my actions to something much bigger than myself. As a result of this, they very quickly purify their minds if you show them the Shastra, very quickly. And they ascertain this knowledge fully. Therefore, they turn into a Jichinatsu, Jichinatsu into a Jnani. So what's the difference between a Kshatriya and a Vaishya? Besides a Vaishya being selfishly active and a Kshatriya being selflessly active, what else is a difference? The Kshatriya actions lead to spiritual growth because they're helping. They're generally concerned about the whole. Whereas a Vaishya, because it is all about myself, my own gain, all of their Rajasic actions do not lead to spiritual growth. They only lead to what? Material growth. In fact, you cannot put anyone down because without the Vaishya, our entire economy would fail. Right? Because we depend on these kind of people. For example, Donald Trump, before he got the president, he's the Vaishya. He's the mover and shaker, the one who gives jobs. All of us who have jobs is a result of a Vaishya. So it's not about putting down anyone. Kshatriya, Karma Yoga, but a Vaishya lives their life of karma. They're always doing something. Like an example between a Kshatriya and a Vaishya. Abraham Lincoln made a Gettysburg Address. If you know the Gettysburg Address, it says 7 years ago. In other words, 87 years ago, this is a Kshatriya statement. Our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty, in other words, in free will, in a space to think, dedicated to the proposition, in other words, dedicated to the idea, to the possibility that all men/women are created equal. Beautiful. In other words, all women and men are created equal, and he designed that Gettysburg Address on the basis of equality. Well, what's the statement of a Vaisha? Let's build a wall. Heard that? Yeah. So what is a Vaisha? Command and conquer. A Vaisha always creates divisions between one and the other. Literally, both physically and in thought. Everything's put in certain categories. You're over there, you do not belong here because you share differences. Whereas a Kshatriya brings what? Unity in all things. That's the difference in thinking. In this way, since both of them are extremely lucky because they've done past work, both Brahmana and Kshatriya, for this reason, they attain liberation if the Shastra is presented to them very, very quickly. This means all four, no matter where one is, and every person in this class and in the entire world fits in one of these categories because our nature, we cannot deny. Some people are highly sattvic, some people are highly rajasic, some people are rajasic and tamasic. So all of these combinations and permutations make us one of these. And this is what moves the whole world. Because to be born as a human being, you're giving free will, and through the use of this free will, one can attain the highest goal in life. Because Mam Bhajaswa, because all human beings are 100% capable of appreciating Ishvara in all things. Because you can appreciate Ishvara in all things, including your family, including the world, including those that you don't like, do not postpone. Anityam asukham lokam. This is easy. Nityam means what? Eternal. Anityam means not eternal. Sukha means happiness. Asukha means not happy. And loka means world. In other words, why should we not postpone this? Because this loka is a loka where joys are short-lived. In other words, whatever joy I think I'm getting from my child, from my husband, my wife, from my family, they are short-lived. The moment the body goes sick, suddenly all of that becomes irrelevant. Health problems, money problems, always have to think about, where's the, am I going to keep my job? All of these problems come and they take over the mind, and the person cannot have 100% joy. And furthermore, all of the joys are not as anticipated. That means we always think it's going to be a certain way, but when it does actually arise, it's never how we expected, because our minds always makes it much bigger than it actually is in real life. So there's a lot of problems or limitations in this loka. That's what Krishna is saying. What's the solution? Start somewhere. Prayer, that's all we need. Just one single prayer. Oh Lord, help me, guide me, show me the way. In other words, as I said, nobody has an excuse to say I can't. Just being a human being means I've been given a free will to use it, thus attain the highest goal. Another principle that I personally like is called Kaizen, constant and never-ending improvement. A human being is limited in their capacity. They cannot do everything. However, we can do something, a little bit. And we can incrementally do something else the next day. And then incrementally add something else the next day. In other words, we can all incrementally add a little step, but what happens, it's got compounding benefits, just like a bank. You put at 1.75% money, so every single time that money is generated for 1.75%, then that comes into the next round next month, and also that contributes to the 1.75%. In other words, it keeps on adding. So if you learn a new language, for example, we've got Sanskrit coming up and that will be interesting, you will realize that the moment you start to learn, it feels like in the moment you're not learning. However, the next day when you return to that same material, there will be a certain layer of clarity about it. And there will be a certain level of ease to comprehend that knowledge. That's the beauty of learning. So you really see how this compounding effect works. A little bit I put in today, but tomorrow the effect is not just a little bit, it's actually a lot more. Manmana bhava madbhaktaha Madiya jimam namaskuru mame vaishyasi yuktvaivam atmanam matparayanaha.
Fix the mind on me. Be my devotee. Keep me as the supreme goal. Be my worshipper. Surrender to me. Fixing the mind in this manner, you will reach me alone, who am the self.
Okay, in this verse, Krishna is going to lead us through 5 stages of bhakti. So every single person who is on this journey goes through these 5 stages. Stage 1. That means we all start at stage 1. Mad bhaktaha bhava. A devotee acknowledges the presence of and devotion to Ishvara. That's the first thing they do. There's this thought, oh, there's a higher deity here. Acknowledge. Just like the first thing that we do if we want to fix a problem is we have to do what? We have to acknowledge that the problem is there. So in the same way, before any of the spirituality takes place, I have to first acknowledge one single thought. There's something much greater here than what I've been concerned about. And in the beginning, the person uses Ishvara, this is stage 1, as a means to worldly ends. Does this sound like Sakama Bhakta? Yes. In other words, another name for it is Artaha and Artharti. Remember these 2 words? Artaha, that means everything's fine in life, no problems, but when problems come, suddenly God becomes number 1 in my life. In other words, when there is a release from job, you know how they release sometimes people, then you don't know if it's going to be you or you're going to stay. Suddenly everyone starts praying. But while they're working, you don't mention the word God even once. You don't even think about it. Driving, don't think about it. Home, don't think about it. Only when problems come, I use Ishvara as a savior. Remember, this is nothing either positive or negative. It's just a stage that one goes to. So in other words, Bhagavan in stage 1 is a personal assistant for worldly gains. What do I mean by this? Anything that is nature of apara prakriti is what I use Bhagavan for. Stage 2. Graduation to matparayanaha. This person comes to understand that the world has limitations. That's what happens next. They used God as worldly attainments. Now I go, you know what? No matter how much I get, what's the big deal, right? It's still the same day. I'm not that happy. So the person recognizes that no matter what I get in life, it is incapable of giving me lasting peace, lasting joy, and lasting security. Stage 2. There's a recognition there. There's a questioning of material world's validity. They start to question. And they say the world is finite. Now, how is this? Now, what's their logic? Their logic is this. If everything in the world is finite, this includes every person, every object, every experience, then how can a finite object, finite person, give me infinite security, infinite peace, and infinite joy? Where's the logic there? See, even a person in themselves has so much ability. They can only be awake for so long. They can only give you so much joy. They can only give you so much security. But that person is finite. So how can this person possibly give me infinity? Impossible. So this is the question that arises. This is why, by the way, in a relationship, I'm speaking of romantic ones right now, the common complaint about one or the other is, I don't feel 100% secure. Something's off. I never feel secure with you. So they keep on, bugging the other person basically for more security. You don't tell me you love me. You don't look at me like you love me. You don't sound like it. And no matter how much you appease them, it only lasts until they're satisfied, right? Until tomorrow, there's another hit you're required to deliver. So the truth is, not a single person in this entire world will ever give you 100% security, peace, or happiness. In fact, if one's complaining, that's correct, because the fact is they cannot get 100% from something that is finite. So what about true love? What is true love? I'm cruising the world, right, going here and there, and suddenly I see someone. Oh, this is it, true love. Now, where's the contradiction? What's the definition of true love? It is eternal. Now, how can an eternal true love begin? Because it wasn't there yesterday. I had to search for it and I found it today. So the moment I say true love, I've just revealed my own false logic. Same thing with heaven. Heaven is eternal, and then I'm supposed to go to an eternal heaven. How is that possible if heaven started at one point? So these ideas start to fall apart because the person starts to question, what is all the security business that I'm seeking? No matter how much money there is in the bank, tomorrow the inflation is going to rise anyway, right? The economy can crash. So the person's constantly worried. They can't ever get 100% in anything, no matter what they seek. For this reason, what becomes their number one goal? Seeking that which is infinite. Stage 1 summary, Ishvara is the means, and stage 2, Ishvara is the end. So there's a means and end shift. Okay, stage 3, Manmana Bhava. Once Ishvara becomes the primary goal in life, it doesn't stop there. The Bhakta attempts to never lose sight of what they have discovered. Now they say, you know, the world's still there, right? It's still there. I'm still got old ways of thinking. And it's still pulling me. So in this stage, the person does all they can through repetitive reminders not to lose track of this knowledge and not to have this fire die away, because the world is constantly trying to put it down through, desires and fancy experiences. In other words, the person understands at this stage Ishvara is the primary goal, and yet they still pursue with secondary goals like marriage gladly. They still go and get married, they still have children, they still attend to grandchildren, they still travel if they want. But amidst, in and through all of their secondary goals, they never forget what is the ultimate purpose, what is the ultimate goal here, and that is to pursue, know thyself, pursue Ishvara. Now suppose a woman was a former salsa dancer, and she wiggles her hips. That's what salsa dancing requires. And some years later, she's watching some shows, and she starts to get attracted to Kathak dancing. Now, Kathak dancing is an Indian dance which requires there's no hip movement there. Now, through time, she becomes an expert Kathak dancer. In other words, she doesn't move her hips, even though she was a salsa dancer. Why is that? Because owing to consistent practice of Kathak dancing, she has retrained her hips not to move. Now, how does she do that? Through ongoing repetitive practice. In other words, she is abiding long enough in Kathak dancing knowledge until that knowledge restricts her hips from no longer moving. In other words, same thing for a stage 3 bhakta. Owing to the bhakta's consistent, repetitive reminders of this knowledge, their mind and intellect gets contained in the framework of this knowledge. Thus, they are no longer jumping out of this framework in their old conditioned ways. Therefore, stage 3, in one summary, deliberate, ongoing thinking about this knowledge. Deliberate, constant reminder. So summary of the stage 3 is non-forgetfulness. Okay, stage 4, Madiya bhava. The person converts all of their actions into a spiritual practice. Now, what is a spiritual practice? Like karma yoga. In other words, the person now starts to understand the essential truth of I, that is the self, and Ishvara is Brahman. Because now they've been exposed to the knowledge. And the knowledge says what? That all that is here is one without a second. owning to this knowledge, the person is not only understanding this, but their life begins to be a reflection of this knowledge. In other words, their behavior with other people also changes automatically. Before, I used to see differences, right? Even in stage 3, I was snapping in and out. I was looking at my old ways. Oh, you're this culture, I'm this culture, so we're apart. And stage 3 was kind of in and out. But stage 4, owning to my consistent practice from stage 3, I'm now trained to see what? The sameness in all things. And what is that sameness? The one essential truth, that is the truth of I and the truth of Ishvara is one, Brahman. So this person thus becomes a karma yogi. Okay, stage 5. Mam Namaskuru. So if the 4 stages are followed diligently and consistently, again, the person starts to live this truth and the vision of oneness becomes firm. That means I start to see, when I say I'm talking about the Buddhi starts to understand the oneness in all things, the oneness that we all share. In other words, when I look at, for example, a person that I don't like, instead of my mind going on to differences, which is what happens for most of us, it sees what? What is the same? What's same? That means I see myself in him or her. That is consciousness, Chaitanya Swarupam. Now, in stage 5, there's a danger, and that is arrogance. So we address that. Because the knowledge has taken place through the help of external helps, like Shastra, through Acharya, through resources, the person starts to understand that I couldn't have done it without help. So this removes the danger of arrogance. Because we do have sometimes, when a person understands this knowledge, there's a sort of superiority. And it's sort of like, well, your tradition is inferior to mine. So, yeah, right? So they have to be very careful. Why? The person starts to see, yes, I did use my own free will. I did come to classes, I did persist, I did contemplate, I did my vichara, my self-inquiry, I did all of that. But the second most important is, I couldn't have done all of that without Ishvara's grace. See, it is only because of Ishvara's grace that I'm able to perform certain things. Think about it this way. Suppose you fly, we'll finish in 10 minutes. Suppose you fly overseas and you find a fantastic teacher, right? And this teacher transforms your life forever. And you go, well, you know, I'm lucky. But if you think about it, you went on a plane that sent you to another country. See, we stopped thinking that, don't we? But if you look at what Ishvara's grace means, back in 1903, the Wright brothers did what? They sent their first machine tube, tried to put something in the sky. In other words, only because of 2 individuals who had a thought of putting an airplane in the sky and manifested that idea into reality, that 100 and something years later, I was able to fly on an airplane and find my teacher. So you see what we mean by never take 100% onto yourself? Because I used so many resources, including the Wright brothers, and including those people who affected them to postulate that idea or that possibility, and the entire timeline that went on, and the petrol they extracted from the ground, all of these things in between I used in order to arrive and find my teacher at some place. So what does Ishvara's grace mean? It means that all of these possibilities that I'm now enjoying today are only possible because of infinite variables that went on, that made themselves available in the right time and the right place, that made it possible for me to say, yes, I found the truth. Therefore, this person understands the interconnectedness of all things which make me now enjoy my life. Thus, it makes arrogance impossible, because I'm only here because of you, you're only here because of me, and we're all here because of everyone else. This is what it means to have this vision of oneness. It is not just blabbing how I am awareness, but it's also understanding that besides the fact that the truth of me and the truth of you is one, the fact is Ishvara's grace is working all around us. How? If you think about plants, without plants we couldn't survive. Even because of plants we can think. Water. Water is available. And there's those people you will never meet who clean our water and we drink and we enjoy. They also contribute to our success and living our life. Okay, 5 conditions summary. Stage 1, develop devotion to Ishvara. Stage 2, one makes Ishvara their ultimate goal. Stage 3, never lose sight of Ishvara as the ultimate goal. Constantly reminding oneself, like the Kathak dancer. Stage 4, convert every single opportunity into a spiritual sadhana. Instead of just helping, help by seeing the interconnectedness of all the laws and orders that are taking place. And stage 5, even though after this knowledge is firm, continue acknowledging the presence of Ishvara until the last breath. Because the mind can always go back to old ways. Finally, what will happen, having gone through these 5 stages successfully? Mam eva eshyasi yuktva ivam atmanam. By living a devotional life, by committing to Ishvara, you will certainly attain the highest goal in life. By making Ishvara your primary goal. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.